Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. The UK government just announced that they're going to be raising your taxes and cutting financial support for the things that you need in order to pay for Brexit.
Of course, we're looking at tax and spending as well.
There are tax rises coming down the track.
Yeah, but I think that this government...
Now, you've already heard people like me point to the research showing that Brexit is costing the UK government about £40 billion a year in lost tax revenue because the economy as a whole is smaller than it otherwise would have been. But hearing them explicitly use that as a reason for them having to raise taxes is wild.
You agreed, yes, there are tax rises coming down the track.
Well, I was really clear during the general election campaign, and we discussed this many times, that I would always make sure that the numbers add up.
So that's Labour's Chancellor Rachel Reeves saying they're going to be raising taxes and cutting spending in order to make the numbers add up. And so the question is, why are the numbers in such a bad state?
The aim here is long-term growth, and one of the things that could set that back is the huge black hole that we're facing, possibly the need for tax rises. I read at the weekend that this government's putting the blame for that at the door of Brexit. Is that something that you agree with?
So the Office of Budget Responsibility, who provide the independent forecasts for government, they have consistently overestimated our productivity performance.
Because of Brexit?
So look, it would be up to them to set that out.
Unless the OBR is about to say something even worse about Brexit, they already have set that out. They're the ones who've said that because the UK is no longer under the same legal system as the EU, that creates barriers when it comes to trading, and that's what's reduced the size of our economy by about 4%. But carry on.
Well, austerity, Brexit, and the ongoing impact of Liz Truss's mini budget, all of those things have weighed heavily on the UK economy.
Okay, so the UK economy is in a bad state because of austerity, Brexit, and Liz Truss's mini budget. Now, with austerity, I'm assuming you're referring to the Conservatives' austerity, not your own. Liz Truss's mini budget, again, that's the Conservatives. But Brexit, yes, it was started under the Conservatives, but you're in control of it now. So in terms of actually improving the economy and getting rid of the bad stuff that's weighing us down, you're blaming a policy that you have full control over.
People thought that the UK economy would be 4% smaller because of Brexit. Now, of course, we are undoing some of that damage by the deal that we did with the EU earlier this year.
Now, the deal she's talking about was a deal made in May, but it was an agreement in principle that we would agree to eventually start following the EU's rules in order to make trade between the UK and the EU easier and therefore cheaper, which would ultimately lower prices in the supermarket, which the supermarkets have now confirmed. But A, that's an agreement in principle. It hasn't happened yet. It still needs to be negotiated. And B, like she said, it only undoes some of the damage. There are estimates that say it's only going to increase our economy by about 0.3% when Brexit cost us 4%. Why? Because the government is still refusing to rejoin the EU single market and customs union, which basically means they're refusing to properly join the EU's trade policy and legal system, which would completely remove all the trade barriers. Why? Because they're too scared of what people like Nigel Farage and the Daily Mail will say about them, which leaves us in a position where the UK government is simply accepting that Brexit is doing and will continue to do long-term damage to the UK.
But there is no doubting that the impact of Brexit is severe and long-lasting.
So the UK government is plainly admitting that Brexit is limiting the size and growth of our economy. And how does that link to the taxes they're about to make you pay?
Why we're putting all the effort into growing our economy, because that in the end is what brings in the tax revenues to be able to afford to keep taxes low.
What she's saying there is that if the economy grows bigger, then they don't have to tax such a large percentage of it in order to get the same amount of money. So let's sum up what you just heard. The person who Labour put in charge of our economy is saying that Brexit is the main active policy that is shrinking our economy. She has said that if the economy is too small, then taxes have to be higher, and that she's now going to raise taxes. Translation, we are now going to be paying higher rates of tax in order to pay for Brexit. And because she said she's going to have to attack spending as well in order to make the numbers add up, that also means cuts to your financial support. Now ask yourself, do you think Brexit is worth you paying higher taxes and losing funding for your public services? Now, in terms of who you should blame and who should be looked to for help, Nigel Farage was the person who originally pressured David Cameron to call the referendum on Brexit in the first place, so he brought all this on. The Conservatives delivered Brexit with, as he loves to take credit for, the help of Nigel Farage, and Labour, notwithstanding the tinkering around the edges, is sustaining Brexit. Meanwhile, you have the Greens under Zach Polanski, who would scrap Brexit altogether and make your bills go down and your living standards improve. And Andy Burnham, the person who's most likely to challenge Keir Starmer for leadership with the Labour Party, who also says we should undo Brexit. So when Labour raises your taxes in November, remember who you should be blaming for that and who we should be looking to. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics, so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.